G'day, folks. So this is Niall McInnes here for the Mindset for Success series, and I've got here my great pleasure to announce Ed Wall, who's an advisor at the Entourage, which I'm a member of, and he's at the Entourage Business Development Centre right now, amidst a bit of flurry there and activity in the background. So Ed I guess achieved a lot in his sort of short span. He's much younger than what you'd expect based on on how much he's achieved. And I wanted to interview him especially because he's always got a big smile on his face, and I think that's a big plus for successful people. That's who I want to model as people that are having fun in business. So I'll sort of let Ed introduce himself, but from my experience, he's a very everyone's going to him for his investment knowledge, and also his knowledge on managing people, and as well as branching into being a sales manager at times in the Commonwealth Bank and a lot of different areas. So I guess how would you introduce yourself, and what do you do? What do you do with yourself nowadays?
Yeah, thanks, mate, and hello to all the listeners. Hopefully, this is some useful information for you. So, I suppose before I start, I should apologise in advance for any noise that might be happening at my end. We don't typically do things normally, so it's not unusual if a party just kicks off in the background. So
yeah.
But no, look, thanks for the introduction, mate. Look, I suppose I often say that my business background was kind of back to front. So a lot of people kind of go out into startup business and kind of learn everything as they go along that way, and then their probably area of opportunity is much more around the high level, strategic stuff, building teams, leading with vision, mission, and values, and cultural stuff, and all of that. So mine was a little bit backwards. So I started out in corporate when I was 18 years old. 12 months later, it was with the bank, as you said, mate, and 12 months later, became a branch manager, and then kind of moved up through the ranks there, where I ended up leading teams of around about 200 or 220 people at a time. So that was, a very, sales-driven culture, very much remotely managing people as well. So you learn a lot from that side of things. And throughout the way, I've always been really keen investor myself. So I bought my first property when I was 18, and then I started to build that portfolio up all the way along the way. Being with the bank obviously helped with that, being able to have the knowledge on what they want to see and how that works. And yeah, then I, over the last handful of years in particular, have very much been getting into the small business scene, obviously in an advisory capacity for around 1,000 odd entrepreneurs at the moment, but also very much in an investment capacity as well. So, I've been able to make a couple of small business investments, help people by taking board positions and helping advise from that standpoint as well. So a lot of my startup knowledge actually learned through buying businesses more so than building businesses. And then a lot of my, I suppose, financial and corporate knowledge around, raising capital and the higher level of business was all through a corporate background, actually. So it's been a whirlwind, but it's been a little bit backward as well, which I actually think has been a bit of an advantage.
Cool. I've heard someone else, a guy I listen to a lot on podcasts, Aubrey Marcus, and I remember him saying before I got into entrepreneurship that he was really glad that he started out dealing with other people's money first before he dealt with his own. But I guess in many respects, you probably were investing your own money beforehand. If you had your own properties at 18.
Yeah, I think, so definitely I did. I think the advantage I had was, I had some really good influences growing up in terms of people who I certainly saw as being financially successful. So it was probably something that I was drummed into me at a lot younger than what a lot of people would probably be exposed to. So my old man was very much, he used to be fairly high up in a corporate company, living in Singapore and that kind of thing. And I used to, as a kid, do a lot of, stock analysis and things like that on the open market for him and his colleagues as well when I was, probably 12 or 13 or so. So I got a bit of an understanding on how to value businesses. Only on a very kind of low level at that point in time. But, the biggest thing for me in terms of getting into property and things like that was I knew very early on that was an objective that I had. So I knew I wanted to get into the market. I knew that I had no other way of getting there other than just working hard and saving at that point in time. I think having that clarity in terms of what I was trying to achieve was probably the biggest thing that was useful for me in order to actually achieve that.
Cool. And at that age, did you have dreams of making, I mean, your first million, or what was sort of your vision at a young age? What were you sort of striving for?
I think that the biggest thing for me was I never wanted to be in a position, I looked around and I saw a lot of people who were, not miserable, but just not overly excited or happy with what they were doing. And, hence why I kind of got into the startup scene, because I admire people who are out there, doing what they're passionate about. But I think that, there was a lot of people that feel they feel trapped, particularly if they're in, a 9-to-5 job that they don't enjoy. So I was always just really passionate about whether I was working for myself or working for somebody else. I didn't really mind so much. It was more just around making sure that I wasn't reliant on anybody else. I wanted to be independent, particularly financially, and to do that, you have to think a little bit differently to how a lot of people might think around, financial principles and what that actually means. And that'll be success financially will be different for every person, of course. But for me, I was definitely setting my sights high and prepared to kind of put in the work while I was younger, so that when I was older, I didn't get stuck in that situation. So that was my motivation.
What's the new vision for you now? What motivates you up in the morning?
Yeah, look, for me now, I'm a huge fan. I had a meeting recently actually with a guy called Matthew Michaelwitz, who wrote a book called Life in Half a Second. And I promote that quite heavily. I think there's a lot of people who benefit from that. But I was fortunate enough to have a meeting with him, and he made a really good point, which was in his view was, if you need to be wealthy, and he details this in the book, you need to own stuff, and you can either build it or you can buy it. For me now, my motivation is to get up in the morning, do what I can to contribute to the clients that I'm working with in terms of their businesses and helping them to succeed. I like to back. I'm a big fan of backing good entrepreneurs. I'm a big fan of backing people who are innovating. I think that's going to be massive for the future of this country. And I think anything that I think the world needs more people who are prepared to give up everything to make something work and have a positive impact in the world. So my motivation is to wake up, find those opportunities, find those people that are giving it everything they've got. And obviously they need to have viable business models and that kind of thing. And backing those guys and helping them go and have a massive impact. And in turn, that'll allow me to have a massive impact.
Cool. Okay. Now, just from what you said there, this is going off topic, but I want to know, what do you think about this country's future right now? Not being very economically aware myself, I'd like to know what you think about as we're moving out of this mining boom, and obviously BHP has recorded these massive drops in their share price stuff lately. Where do you see this country's going if entrepreneurship doesn't take off?
Yeah, look, great question. I think, and look, to be quite honest, I try to avoid a lot of the stuff that, as I call it, that kind of goes on, in politics and all that. I'm happy for those guys to argue some of that stuff out. But, for me, I think that, in the scheme of the world, Australia is not a massive player. And I think that, even from a population standpoint, we need to be batting above our average, if you like, in terms of being able to contribute. I think that up until now we've been fortunate. We've obviously got a lot of resources in terms of the geographical space that we have. Our mining, we've got forestry, we've got agriculture, and that kind of thing. I think that whilst we're relying on resources like that, which are finite in terms of being able to export and things like that, I just really think that innovation is highly sustainable. I think the impact that you can have with innovation is uncapped. It purely just depends on the ideas and that come out of the country. So I really think that you can't rely forever on resources that are in the ground. It's just not a viable model. So I think that innovation globally, but particularly in Australia, is going to be really, really important for the sustainable future of the country. So.
Sure. And also, another thing you said there about relying on sort of politics and what is going on. I often say to people that when people get in political debates, and my response is always, if you spend as much time talking about politics and how much it's affecting your life on improving your own life, then you realise how little politics actually has to do with your
Yeah,
life
you
in
know,
general.
I think I agree with you. I think there's no lack of information in the world at the moment. There's information everywhere. We don't need more information. We don't need more opinions. We don't need any more of that. What we need to do is we need to take action. And I think that the difference between a successful person and someone who may not necessarily achieve, and when I say success, I say that very cautiously, because I think success to each individual is different, right? So I think it depends on what they want to achieve. But you know, I'm a strong believer of the fact that we've got to make our own decisions. You know, we've got to be able to, so we take the information that we need. We then need to, you know, digest that, understand what it means to us, and draw our own conclusions in terms of what we're doing, whether that be personally or financially. And as long as we're getting what we want out of it, then I think that's what's most important. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So now, I mean, outside of business, what is it that fires you up? What else fires you up outside business?
Yeah. Look, I'm a huge, I suppose in a lot of ways, I love being around other people, right? So I think that's why, you know, leadership and business and that kind of thing really appeals to me. But at the same time, I also don't mind my own space, right? So if I get a day to myself, you know, whilst a lot of people kind of will probably be bored or be lost with what they want to do, I actually love that. I draw a lot of energy from, you know, internal kind of resources more so than external. And I love to my three highest values, right, is health, growth, and contribution. And what I mean by that is I genuinely don't think there's anything more important than health in life, right? So that's ultimately what you've got. Nothing else can take precedence over that, in my view. Then, you know, growth being my second value, which means that, you know, whilst ever I'm doing something to improve my knowledge, improve any aspect of my life, and growing out, you know, either through talking to other people or, you know, reading books or listening to podcasts or whatever it might be, you know, that makes me feel good. I think that in terms of contribution, when I give back to other people, it makes me feel good. So whether that's through advisory or whether it's through a conversation with a friend or family, it makes me feel good. So, you know, I'm a huge fan. In terms of what fires me up, I'm actually a massive fan. I don't necessarily, I draw a lot of excitement from a lot of the basic things. I think that for me, I'm big on principles. I'm not a very structured person. I don't like necessarily saying, okay, this is exactly what I'm doing in 6 months' time. So every day until then, I'm doing this, and this. Like, yes, I've got an element of that, but primarily I'm very principles driven. So I'm very clear on what my values are. I'm very clear on what my principles are. And I make sure that I get up and live every day in accordance to that, which in turn makes me experience a lot of the positive emotions a lot more than the negative ones, which I think is, you know, probably the biggest objective that we can have.
Cool. I'm right into lately. I've got a book by Wayne Dyer and talking about abundance mentality, and I've noticed with all the successful people I've been studying is that they're always focusing on, you know, glass half full mentality, or focusing what they do have rather than what they don't have. Is that something you've trained yourself to be? Do you think you're naturally a positive person? Is it something you've worked on through personal development?
I do a lot of PD. I used to think that I used to be very tangible. What I mean by very tangible is I was very outcome focused in terms of I would focus so heavily on the outcome that if I didn't achieve the outcome that I wanted, I'd be disappointed, or I'd be, you know, I'd feel bad about that. It took me a long time, particularly over the last few years, you know, doing a lot of, you know, a lot of work on understanding what spirituality is, understanding that whilst ever you're looking for an external source to try and make you feel better or feel good or whatever it is, you're typically always going to have a little bit of a hollow feeling. You know, use finance as an example, right? So, you know, I love the game. So whether I reach the ultimate outcome or not, whether that be $1 billion or less or whatever it is, right? Like whether I reach that will not determine whether or not I feel happy or good about my life. It actually did take a lot of work. It took a lot of work on, you know, gratefulness. You know, I did a little bit of meditating. It's not something that I do every day, but for me, it might just be, you know, I might be, you know, sitting in the passenger seat of the car just with an opportunity to think about certain things, and or going for a run and thinking about where things are at, and what I am happy with and what I am grateful for. I think one thing I've learned from studying people who are, people who I kind of am inspired by, for example, your Warren Buffetts and things like that, but if I look at those types of people, one of the things they say is that, regardless of how much money you've got, regardless of how much success you have or whatever, like the basic things in life are pretty similar. So, we watch the same TV, we eat similar types of food, we still ultimately can only be in one place at any one time. So you've got to really appreciate those more humble things in life. And I think the rest of it is nice to have and a bonus for sure, but you can't let it determine whether or not you're happy. I think whether someone's got a lot of money or whether someone's got, a nice job title or whether, all of that stuff, like, to me, that's just stuff. I think what's important is what is, and it sounds kind of cliche, but, internally, how does that person feel? It took a lot of work. It took a lot of work to get used to that. But you've got to, I had coffee recently with a guy called Mike Duff, and he wrote a book called The Power Within, in kind of conjunction with John Newcomb, the highly successful, tennis player. And one of the things that they talk about is the fact that highly successful sports people, in their view, are very in touch with who they are, and they're also very in touch with their the fact that they love the game so much that the outcome is just a bonus, right? So, to be in the game is an honour. To whether you win it or not is a different thing, and absolutely play to win and be deliberate and do the things you need to do to try and get there, but don't let it determine whether or not you're happy.
Yes. And I think it's very hard for people to get to the top if they're not feeling that passion with whatever they're doing anyway. So, so it sort of makes sense that passion, or money follows passion and success follows passion. So
yeah, and one last thing I'll just say on that as well is people get there's a lot of noise out there, right? So whether it be your social media stuff where you see everybody's glamorous lives and all that kind of stuff, which we all know are different, in reality, and people are very much influenced by the people around them, and that can be a good thing if you've got the right people around you. But at the same time, I would just look at that and say, think for yourself. If you want to learn to invest in something, if you want to learn to be good at any particular field, learn it, and put the time in to learn it, and understand that it might take time for you to get to the point that you need to be at to be successful at it. But don't just look at the people around you and take stock tips because someone told you it was a good idea. Understand the things that you're doing, make your own conclusions, and follow your own path. And the only person you need to be live up to is your own expectations, not anyone.
How would you right now, if you were giving advice to someone, tell them to get around successful people, positive people? What's your advice there?
Yeah, great question. Do you know what? And this is a conversation I have a lot with people. There's a couple of things here. I'm a huge fan of, and I kind of pride myself on the fact that I feel like I can have good relationships with anybody, right? So I do not believe that everybody you have in your life has to add, monetary or business value or anything like that. I think there's a lot of people out there that might have a lot of very hollow relationships. Right? I think the best relationships you can have are definitely with those people who are close to you, family, close friends, etc. And never forget who those people are who are always in your corner no matter what, right? So that's the first thing. But in terms of being able to establish your circle of influence, right, which is people who you can learn from, people who have been there and done that, there's a couple of things here. They don't always have to be 10 levels in front of you, right? They might just be someone who's, 10 or 20% further advanced than you. They might have been around a little bit longer than you. They might have been shown a little bit more success than you, or had a couple of wins that you are inspired by. I always think to be able to advise someone, you just need to know a little bit more than they do, right? Because that puts you in a position where you can add some value to them. But I think the biggest thing that stops people from surrounding themselves with really positive influence is that people feel like people are not contactable. The awesome thing about today's world is everybody's contactable. Like I said, some of the guys I've met with, and I mentioned, Mike Duff, and I mentioned Matthew Michaelwitz and that kind of thing. You don't meet with these guys because you sit around twiddling your thumbs waiting to find out whether or not they're going to. You meet with them because you put the feelers out, you make contact with them, you compliment them on the work that they've already done that you might have benefited from already. So it's all about you've just got to put yourself out there, right? A lot of these guys want to give back. A lot of these guys are that's where they draw their energy from, is the fact that, yeah, they have been there and done this, but they want to help people now who are up and coming to get better and be more successful and all that kind of thing. So, if you can have a half an hour conversation with someone who's got 20 years on him, who has demonstrated the things that you see as successful or whatever, and it might not even be from a tangible point of view, right? It might just be that you've got someone who, seems to just be intrinsically happy all the time, right?
Yeah.
Those types of people. Some of the gems that they'll drop you in a 20 or 20 minute or half an hour conversation is worth 10 years of traditional study, right? So I think, number one, put yourself out there. Number two, if you get value from something, if you read someone's book or you listen to someone's podcast and you enjoy it, let them know. Open up some dialogue with them. Thank the people. The information's out there, right? And then the last thing that I would say is that you don't necessarily have to be best mates with all these people. You can still surround. What are you doing? All you got to do is look around on trains and any type of public transport and things like that. You look at public places and have a look at what people are looking at on their phones, what they're listening to in their ears. Right? Most people aren't necessarily actively looking to better themselves. So if you spend 2 hours playing Angry Birds when you could have spent 2 hours looking at, and you could have spent 2 hours kind of listening to a podcast in a field that you're interested in, regardless of what that might be, everybody, it's out, the information's there, you just got to find it.
Yes. And I'm going to take that advice straight on, because I just love that. Compliment someone on stuff you've enjoyed and used, and use that as a conversation starter. And that's what this sort of series is about, is just a chance for me to ask questions on how to improve my life for people that I want to be more like.
Totally. And also, right, when you meet with some of these guys, like I say, you might meet someone who's 10 or 20% more advanced than you are in a particular field, right? So you talk to those guys, and then they introduce you to someone who might be 10 or 20% more advanced than them. So, as long as it's something, again, huge fan of focus, right? As long as it's something you're focusing on, you will start to see the opportunity. You might be in a conversation with someone and they mention somebody's name who it sounds like you would like to meet them, right? Now, if you hadn't been focusing on the fact that you want to build your circle of influence of people, you're not going to notice that opportunity. But when you're thinking about it, you're going to notice it. So, this stuff isn't rocket science, but it's just you've got to want it. You've got to want to actually get yourself out.
Yeah, that's the main principle behind goal setting. It's not that you're creating it. The universe is creating it. You open your mind up to the fact that it's available when you know what you want, and then when these things pop up that before you wouldn't even notice, is just that that will help me get to that goal I've been thinking about all week. Rather than before, it's just And
it's like when you if you want to buy. I remember when I was about 18, I wanted to buy a nice car, right? That's important at that stage of your life, yeah. So that was something that I wanted to do, and I remember it clearly. It was a Subaru GT Premium, right? Now I don't even know why I wanted to buy it, but now at the time I started seeing them everywhere. Once you lock in on something, it is everywhere, and it's not because more were being manufactured or more were being distributed. It's just that I was aware of it, right? So you can apply that to every aspect of your life, but I think having clarity and focus on what you want allows you to filter the information that you need so that you can then go and act in a way that's according to your own goals and your own vision and your own values for your life.
So let me ask you about that. Are you the kind of guy that writes down your goals every day, or what's that process for you look like? Or is it just here?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, right? I've got a I'm very visionary about where I see my future, right? So I when I think, it's easier for me to think about 10 years in advance than it is to think about what I'm doing tomorrow. I have a very clear picture and vision for where I want to go. Now, is that written down? Not that particular goal, no. Am I very clear on what I need to do in the next 5 years to get me there? Yes. Now, where is that written down? In my house, I've got a wardrobe with mirrors on the doors. And to be quite honest, typically if I have a good idea in the middle of the night, which is often when they come up, or if I'm a big fan of taking what I know, what I've been able to learn from people, and really trying to develop that into a model that makes sense to me. Right? So I typically what I do is I reach over and grab some lipstick out of my partner's bedside table mat, and I draw it on the mirror.
Wicked.
And often the amount of times, honestly, that she's been like, it's the middle of the night. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, look, just let me go." And then I find myself presenting it to her because it's helping me to clarify it in my mind. It's so I think write it down, have it somewhere, have something somewhere where it's going to remind you every day of why you're getting out of bed. And it doesn't have to be a massive thing. It could just be. It could be. So if you're trying to focus on gratefulness, like, write it on your mirror where you're going to look every day and go, right, okay, I'm going to be grateful for 10 things today. And hold yourself accountable to doing that. So, look, I'm not someone, like I said, that's going to break it down into very minuscule, minute goals, but I am very clear on where I see my next 5 or 10 years. And I have broad models in place which are going to help me to get there, which in turn kind of guide my thinking and decision making.
Yeah, perfect. That's good to hear, because some people get hung up on goal setting, and if they're not that very what's the word I'm trying to think of, analytical thinker, I suppose, where they're setting their goals every day. As long as you find a system that works for you, then that's all that matters. And most importantly, know if you want more energy in your life, or you want more money, know what the intention is behind it, and then find a system that just works for you.
Yeah, and look, I think that you can. There is a lot of research and study out there that proves that writing down goals has a massive impact, right? Because it increases your focus. But exactly to your point, I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's nothing wrong with doing something that works for you, and I think that there's so many of us that are prepared to go and take advice from someone and just do it because they said, without actually going, okay, does that work for me? You've got to set your life up and your projects up and all the things that you're focusing on in a way that's going to make a lot of sense to you.
Sure. So I know we're sort of running out of time, so I want to ask you, there's one question that I've been going through lately is a morning ritual. Do you have a morning, weekly, daily ritual you follow to any sort of structure?
Yeah. Look, I suppose you could call it a ritual. For me, I see it more as a principle, right? As I said before, that's how I tend to operate. I know that regardless of what's going on, right, whether you've got a big event to attend, whether you've got just a low key day or whatever, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I know that if I exercise first thing in the morning, I'm going to have an awesome day.
Perfect.
So that's what I do. I'll make sure every single morning I'm either at the gym, or I'm out doing hill sprints, or I'm going for a jog, or I'm doing something active to get myself out there before I do anything else. That's before breakfast, before anything.
Cool.
It just gets my mind into a place where I feel good. So in terms of morning rituals, that's what I do, and I always follow that up by eating something healthy and fresh first thing in the morning. That would be probably the extent to a morning ritual, but I do that without fail.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing, I've got 2 more questions for you. One is, if you had to define it down to one thing that you see you do differently to say people who haven't quite made it yet, what is that one thing that you feel that you do differently that you can attribute your success to?
Clarity. There's so many people. All you've got to do is go and find the first 10 people you can see, right, and ask them what they want from their life, where they're going, why they're doing what they're doing. It's not very often that you get a very clear answer on what somebody actually wants. And it's hard, right? I think we're spoiled for choice. And as I say, there is so much information. There's so many people trying to tell you, how to make your first million, or how to do whatever, it's all out there. You've got to try and, there's a couple of things. I think hard work's very important. So I think once you know what you want, even if it's just a vague idea, what you don't want to be doing is changing tact every 6 months with what you're doing, right? Because you're always going to be starting at the bottom. What you need to do is you need to understand at least what the bigger picture goal is for you, right? Now, that you might not know exactly what that looks like from a tangible point of view, but what type of person do you want to be in the future? That's highly important, right? What type of person do you want to be? So more than what do you want to have, who do you want to be? That's the question that you really want to ask yourself. And then what do you need to learn, right? Because I believe education changes everything, right? So what do you need to know to become that person? What are the things that you need to learn? How can you educate yourself? Now, that will include, who do you need to meet? So who do you need in your life? Who have you got in your life at the moment who may not be helping you, or who may not be a positive influence in your life that that, you can change everything, right? You're fully responsible for everything that you do. So if you don't like your job, if you don't like your business, if you don't like where you live, if you don't like the relationship you're in, if you don't like your financial situation, you can change everything in a heartbeat, right? So I think people overestimate the worst case scenario. Know what you want, get clear on that, and start to work towards it, and be prepared to have a long-term view, right? So yeah, there'll be some immediate things that you can do, but you're not going to get good at everything overnight. So if you want to be super, super fit, right, yeah, you can go on a fad diet, you can do all that kind of stuff. But reality is, if you eat well and you exercise every day and you do that for a long period of time, you're going to end up being a really fit and healthy person, right? Finance is the same. If you do little things right, for a long period of time, you will be successful. And the same thing comes with anything in your life. If you want to be good at something, be prepared to give it the time that it deserves.
Cool. Righto. Now, I know we are going over time, but I'll get in trouble if I didn't ask this question, because as the investor guy, I want to know what, not for me personally, but I guess for me, I see with my clients, negative emotion gets in the way of making decisions in business and also to life, and definitely in investing. So I'd like to hear what you do to take emotion out of your decisions, whether it be investing, business, life, or what do you do?
Great question. I could talk about this for a week. For me, it's very clear. I think there's a lot of business principles that you can apply to a personal life, right? So in business, it's very important to have insight over your financials, because that is your scoreboard. That is how you know whether or not you're actually being successful achieving your objectives. In your personal life, it's exactly the same thing, right? So, the amount of times you see someone go, oh yeah, but I really want that house because, it's got a perfect kitchen, or it's, it looks really nice. Well, that's all great, but that's not an investment, right? If you're buying it for emotional reasons, you're not actually doing it for reasons that are going to help you build wealth. Okay. If everything comes down to the maths behind it, right? I just don't, you just don't buy into that stuff. So, if I'm going to go and buy a house, I don't give a shit what it looks like. I don't care, if the numbers stack up, if I've done the research and I understand why I'm buying it. And, I saw an awesome podcast again from Buffett the other day, who said, you need to be able to answer the question why, right? So if you're investing in something, ask yourself why. Right. So if you can say, I'm investing in this company, or I'm investing in this property because blah, blah, blah. If you can't answer that, you probably haven't done your due diligence, right? So most people make their investment decisions on an emotional basis, hence why most people probably don't even reach their financial milestones. It's really simple. Don't let emotion play a part. If it's an investment, it's an investment. The numbers need to do the talking. So understand the numbers and the metrics that you need. Get those numbers and metrics, and it either works or it doesn't. It's black and white. There's actually no grey area involved, right? Once again, the biggest thing that if you look at some of the most financially successful people in the world, one of the biggest things they talk about is capital preservation and adequate returns, right? Which is, how can you make an investment in something where you mitigate your risk as much as you can so that you're less likely to lose money before you even think about how much money you're going to make. Yeah. And I think that's a really sound piece of advice. I think that a lot of the time in life, things are risky because we haven't put in the time to learn it. So most of us go, you know what, I don't like finances, so I'm going to just get my financial planner to do that for me. Now, do you actually even know the background of your financial planner? Who are they? Are they someone who you want to replicate or model? So I think the biggest thing there is around, let the numbers do the talking. If you don't know your numbers, whether that is business, whether that's property, whether that's shares, regardless of what you're investing in, if you don't know your numbers, don't invest in it. And don't let somebody else just tell you it's a good idea.
Cool. Well, thanks for staying a bit over time for me. That was I could just keep talking all day. That was good fun.
Mate, no worries. That was awesome. Yeah, enjoyed it, mate. And yeah, look, again, for everybody listening, hopefully that was beneficial. But the biggest thing is, as I say, there's a lot of information out there, but what makes the difference is implementation and taking action. So, hopefully there's at least one thing that people can take away that can make an improvement in their own life.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Edward Wall, and I'll speak to you soon.
No worries, mate. Looking forward to it. See you soon. Bye.